Okay, so right now I'm going to go over the DJI menu system for the Mavic Mini. So first of all, you need to open up the app, which is the DJI Fly app. And as you can see here, we've kind of got a screen. And on this screen, we've got all kinds of different information. Top left, you've got your mode, which is your position mode, sport mode, or cine smooth mode, which gets you just super slow cinematic shots. You've got your kind of warning system there. If there is a warning, it says takeoff permitted. You've got your satellites. You've got your kind of connection quality. That's what those bars mean right there. You've got your battery percentage. And then you've got your flight time as well. On the bottom left, we've got kind of a map here so we can see where we're at. You can blow that up if you want. If you happen to lose it, you can do Find My Drone, make it do a beeping sound so you can find it. It's really cool. Let's get back here really quick. You've got your height, your distance, and all that good stuff. So now we're going to talk about the camera settings and then most importantly, some of the behind the scenes settings that are really important to get set up. So we're going to tap the three buttons on the top right of the screen. And we're going to make sure that we've got max altitude turned on, max distance turned on, auto return to home, land, just put it higher than any of the trees that you usually fly around, so maybe like 100 feet or so. You can do pretty high if you want, but I would not go that high, like 100 feet or so. Okay, so now we're going to go to control, and here you can select the different modes. We want to go to Imperial because I'm in the US, that's what I'm used to. Now we're going to go to advanced, right here on the right side, next to gimbal. And here we're going to set the pitch speed to about 7 and the pitch smoothness to about 11. Now what this does is it makes you can move it up and down and keep it fairly smooth, and you can experiment with different kind of speeds and different smooth settings and kind of find the one that you want. So I might bring that up a little bit. So about an 8 and a 17, but you can just kind of experiment, and you want to use the little knob on the left side of your controller to practice your up and down. For photos, this is not a huge deal. For video, this is where it's more of a deal. And you want to make sure, this is really important, you want to make sure and select the allow upward gimbal rotation. So as you can see, this is as high as it goes when that's turned off. And that's not good because we cannot look up, look into trees, look up like a waterfall or something. You lose a lot of range and capability. So we want to make sure and turn this on. Now watch, all of a sudden we can look up really high and be able to see a lot more. So that's absolutely crucial thing to turn on, and it's kind of hidden right there. Gimbal calibration, that's where you do that right there. Now we're going to go to camera. So for photos, I would shoot in 4:3 because that's using more of the sensor size. And 69 is actually cropping more of it. As you can see on the bottom left there a little bit, when I go to 4:3, you actually see more of the ground. So if I'm doing photos, you want to do 4:3 for sure. Videos, I think it defaults to 16:9. Here's where you format your cards. We got our advanced settings right here. You want to turn on at least this one right here, which turns on some grids. And this helps you kind of get your rule of thirds down. And then there's also like a middle marker if you want, and you can do a big X on there. It's kind of up to your preference. And then the histogram, we want to turn that on so we just kind of get a good visual representation of what we're seeing. And then we're also going to turn on the overexposure warning, and I'll show you how that works in a little bit. And then video subtitles, we could turn that on, and then we could do cache when recording. That basically saves a backup recording to your iPhone or whatever device you're using, and then you've got a capacity of how much it's going to save before it deletes the old stuff. So you can kind of select that depending on how, the size of the storage on your phone. You can kind of determine how much you want to use on that. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the main menu, and above the record button on the right, that white button, I'm going to tap on that square. So we got photo, video, and quick shot. So I'm going to go ahead and go to photo mode. And you can see that's pretty much it. This is your option. You can take a single photo. Go ahead and take one. You can do a time shot. So you could potentially do a manual time lapse with this actually. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. You'll see every 2 seconds it's going to take a photo. So this is when a manual time lapse would actually work, because you cannot do a time lapse as of right now with the MAVIC Mini. So you could totally do that with that. And then you can change the seconds. You definitely want to do 2 seconds for that time mode for like a time lapse. And then for video mode, you've got your frame rates, 25 frames per second or 30. If you shoot in 30, then you can slow it down to 24 frames per second in post, and it gives you a very slight slow motion kind of cinematic feel. So that's almost what I'd recommend for most of your stuff if you're planning on slowing it down. If not, then 25 works. And then it shoots at 2.7K or 1080p. You can bring up the frame rate up to 60 frames per second and then slow it down to 24 frames, which gives you some really good slow-mo capabilities at 1080p. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to adjust the exposure, and there's 2 ways to do it on the MAVIC Mini. So the first way to do it is we're going to tap the EV button on the bottom right, as you can see, and you can adjust that up or down. This is going to, it's basically EV is a combined value of your f-stop and your shutter ISO, and you can adjust it accordingly to where it looks good. As you can see, what I want to do is I want to blow out the highlights so that it turns into that zebra. That means it's overexposed. That means like that is white, that's pure white. So I'm just gonna back it off a hair, and then I'm gonna call that good exposure. Now I'm gonna hit the AE button with the lock on it. Lock that guy. It's kind of hard to hit. I hit that. Now that guy's locked. So no matter where I fly, and if I look up or down, then it's not gonna change any settings. It's not going to change the color, not going to change the exposure. Now watch, if I unlock it, watch this. So I'm going to look down and I'm going to unlock it. All of a sudden it just went white, right? So watch, it's going to be changing around as I go up. You can see the exposure automatically changing, and that's not good when you're shooting videos or trying to do photos or whatever, because it's going to be always changing. The color's going to be changing, the white balance. And that's not good. That's not professional, having your image change in a shot. So you want to lock that off as much as possible. So you just want to kind of get your good exposure. So I'm going to back it up again, bring it up to like 1.3 or 0.3. I'm going to lock it, and now I'm good to go. I can fly, and I know that it's not going to be changing color or exposure while I'm flying. And that's the automatic kind of way to do it. Now the manual way is you go down to the bottom right, tap on the auto camera. And when you hit that, it's going to basically set everything in the manual settings, and from here we can adjust our exposure to whatever it needs to be. For photos, I like to be over 120. For video, around 50 is a good place to be. Yeah, so it's pretty bright outside. So what we're going to do is you want to make sure and have a ISO as low as possible if it's daylight. If it's nighttime, that's where you can start to kind of creep it up a little bit more. But you want to make sure and have the shutter is what you're going to be using to make this happen. So we're going to bring this down till we have kind of good exposure, and then now we don't have to worry about locking anything or anything turning off. It's going to be locked at that proper exposure. So that's how you do that. Also, one other thing, you can see this histogram right here. This is going to tell you your exposure as well. So if it's kind of slammed to the left, that means the parts on the left is the dark side, the parts on the right is the light side. So as you can see, we're not overexposed for sure, because we're not seeing anything. As you can see, when I go down into the ground there, everything gets really quite dark, everything gets lower. Then as I bring it up, everything starts to get kind of higher. And then I'll show you what happens as I adjust the exposure here. So as I crank it up, you can see I'm probably still good there because I'm not maxing out. I'm not quite clipping on my highlights. So I'm probably pretty good right there for exposure, but you can use that in addition to the zebras to see exactly what is going on to set your exposure. Yeah, and that's kind of the basic menu system and how to set your exposure on the MAVIC Mini.